When I first started talking about shame, I expected people to lean back. I thought I'd see arms crossed, faces tense, because honestly, who wants to sit around and talk about shame? But here's what surprised me. Every time I brought it up, I saw the opposite. People leaned in. They didn't just listen. They wanted to talk about it. And I get it. Shame is heavy, sticky, and uncomfortable. But when it comes from family, the people who are supposed to love and protect us, it cuts deeper than almost anything else. Maybe you grew up hearing, "You'll never be enough." Or maybe it was quieter, just a look or a shrug that said, "You don't belong." Sometimes it's even wrapped up in love, like, "I just want what's best for you." But it still hurts. It still makes you feel like you're not measuring up. Now, the hard truth is that shame handed down from those we love can shape us in ways we don't always understand. It can make us believe that we are inherently flawed or unworthy. But here's the good news. Just because it's been passed down doesn't mean we have to keep carrying it. We can break the cycle. Shame often isn't born with us, it's learned. Research shows that families unknowingly pass down shame through words, behaviors, and unspoken expectations. Recognizing that it's not your fault is the first step toward breaking the cycle. Let's get real for a moment. Nobody walks into a room proudly carrying their shame. We don't wear it like a badge or announce it at family gatherings. Shame is quieter. It's the feeling that there's something inherently wrong with us, that we're fundamentally flawed. And when that feeling comes from family, the people who are supposed to know us best and love us the most, it sticks in ways that are hard to shake. When I first started researching shame, I was struck by how often people said the same thing. "I didn't even know it was shame. I just thought I was failing." It's amazing how easily shame can disguise itself. It doesn't always show up as harsh criticism or direct insults. Sometimes it's the silence after you've done something wrong, the disappointed sigh, the unspoken expectation that you should have known better. Think about it. Maybe you grew up in a family that valued hard work above everything else. If you weren't the top of your class, if you didn't bring home the right kind of achievement, it wasn't just seen as a mistake, it was a reflection of your worth. Or maybe emotions were something you didn't talk about. You were expected to keep it together and be strong, and if you didn't, there was that subtle shift, the look that said, "What's wrong with you?" It doesn't always come from a bad place. Sometimes the people who love us pass down shame without even realizing it, because they're carrying their own unspoken burdens. Maybe your mom grew up in a family where vulnerability was seen as weakness, and now she can't help but wince when you talk about feeling anxious or unsure. Or your dad, who was taught that being successful means never admitting fear, struggles to understand why you're hesitant about a new job. Shame is a cycle. It moves from one generation to the next, often disguised as advice or care. The problem is, when we internalize it, when we start believing that our struggles make us less than, it becomes a part of our story. We start writing our lives around this unspoken rule. If I'm not perfect, I'm not lovable. I've seen it time and time again. People who don't even know they're carrying shame because it's been part of their lives for so long. One of the most powerful moments is when they finally name it. It's like a light goes on. Suddenly, they realize that all those years of trying to be perfect, of keeping it together, weren't about being strong. They were about hiding. And here's what's important. Once you see it, you can change it. Once you name it, you can start rewriting the story. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It means you have to sit with it, hold it up to the light, and say, "This doesn't belong to me." Sometimes we have to grieve the idea that our families didn't always get it right. We have to let go of the expectation that the people who loved us never heard us. That's a tough reality to face because it means admitting that even love can carry pain. But once we accept that, we can begin to see our families with more compassion, not as villains, but as people who were doing the best they could with what they had. And that's when real healing can happen. You can stop trying to earn love through perfection. You can start allowing yourself to feel messy, human, and beautifully imperfect. You can create boundaries without feeling like you're betraying anyone. It's about breaking the cycle, not just for yourself, but for the generations that come after you. It's about saying it stops with me, and that's not just brave. It's revolutionary. If you're carrying shame that doesn't belong to you, know this: you have permission to put it down. You don't have to keep carrying it just because it's familiar. The story doesn't end with the pain you inherited. It can begin with the courage you choose. Let's keep leaning into this together, because the more we talk about it, the more power we have to change it. Shame thrives in secrecy. I often say that if we don't talk about it, it owns us. Naming the shame, saying it out loud, even if it's just to yourself, is powerful. It's not weakness, it's courage. One of the most eye-opening moments I've had in my research was when someone told me, I didn't know it was shame until I heard someone else say it. That's the tricky thing about shame. It loves to hide in the dark. It convinces you that if you say it out loud, if you name it, you'll somehow make it more real. But here's the truth. Naming it doesn't make it grow, it makes it lose its grip. When shame lives inside of us unspoken, it's like a heavy, silent weight. It's that thing that keeps you up at night, replaying every moment where you didn't measure up, didn't say the right thing, didn't look the right way. It whispers, if people knew this about you, they'd leave. And the more we keep it locked inside, the more it digs in, convincing us that staying quiet is safer. I remember talking to a woman who grew up in a household where mistakes were met with ridicule. If she didn't get perfect grades, she wasn't just corrected, she was shamed. So as an adult, she carried this belief that admitting a mistake meant exposing her deepest flaws. She told me, I just kept it to myself. I didn't want anyone to know how imperfect I really was. But here's the irony. Keeping that shame hidden didn't protect her. It isolated her. She started avoiding situations where she might make a mistake, pulling back from relationships where she might have to be honest about her struggles. She was living small to keep her shame a secret. And that's what shame does. It doesn't just make us feel bad about ourselves, it shrinks our lives. When we don't name it, it controls us. It tells us to play it safe, to avoid vulnerability, to keep our messy parts locked away. But naming shame, just saying it out loud, takes that power back. You don't have to start by telling the world. In fact, don't start there. Start with someone you trust, or even just a journal. Write it down. Say, I feel ashamed because, and see what comes up. When you name it, you take the first step in breaking its hold. You might be surprised at what happens when you do. One woman I spoke to said that when she finally told her friend about feeling ashamed for not living up to family expectations, she expected rejection. Instead, her friend just listened, nodded, and said, I get that. And just like that, the shame that felt suffocating suddenly had space to breathe. Research tells us that shame needs 3 things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. When you remove secrecy by naming it, when you break the silence by speaking it, and when you choose compassion over judgment, shame can't survive. It's like taking the fuel away from a fire. It loses its ability to burn. Sometimes naming the shame isn't easy. Your voice might shake, your heart might race, but I've learned that the bravest moments often feel that way. Courage isn't about feeling fearless. It's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. When you name your shame, you're saying, I'm not going to let this control my life anymore. You don't owe anyone perfection. You don't owe anyone a flawless life. What you owe yourself is the freedom to live without the weight of shame that's been handed down to you. Naming it is the first step. It's telling yourself, this isn't mine to carry anymore. If you're worried about what others will think, remember this: the right people, the ones who truly see you and care for you, they're not looking for perfection. They're looking for connection, honesty, and courage. And by sharing your truth, you're inviting that kind of connection into your life. It's not about unloading your deepest fears on everyone you meet. It's about being intentional and choosing safe, supportive spaces where your truth can be honored. Start small. Start with someone who gets it. Or start with yourself, standing in front of a mirror and saying, I feel ashamed because, and breathe. When you take that step, you reclaim your story. You say, I'm not going to live in the dark anymore. And that's how the healing begins, by letting light in, one brave word at a time. Let's keep talking about this, because the more we share, the less shame has room to grow. One of the hardest parts of breaking the shame cycle is setting boundaries, especially with family. It's okay to protect your space, even when it feels uncomfortable. Boundaries aren't walls, they're guidelines for how we want to be treated. I know how this sounds. Setting boundaries with family, that can feel like walking a tightrope. We grow up believing that family comes first, that loyalty means putting up with just about anything. But the truth is, sometimes the people who love us most are also the ones who push our boundaries the hardest. And that's complicated. When I first started talking about boundaries, I could almost feel the discomfort in the room. People would say, but it's family. How do you draw the line with your own parents, your siblings, or even your kids? It's not easy. I'll be the first to admit that, but it's necessary. One of the biggest myths about boundaries is that they're about keeping people out. It's easy to picture boundaries as these big brick walls we build to protect ourselves from hurt, but that's not it. Boundaries aren't meant to separate us from our loved ones. They're meant to create a healthier way of being together. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a woman who grew up feeling like she had to take care of everyone around her. Her parents leaned on her for emotional support from a young age. As she grew older, she found herself constantly saying yes, whether it was helping with bills, managing family conflicts, or being the shoulder everyone cried on. She was exhausted, but every time she thought about saying no, she felt guilty. In her mind, setting boundaries meant being ungrateful, unloving, even selfish. But here's what we uncovered together. Her willingness to always be there wasn't just about love, it was also about fear. The fear of being seen as unkind or ungrateful. She was caught between wanting to be there for her family and needing to protect her own well-being. And that's the tricky part. When we don't set boundaries, we think we're being kind, but in reality, we're building up resentment, one small moment at a time. I often say that daring to set boundaries means having the courage to love ourselves even when it might disappoint others. It's about saying, I care about you, but I also care about me. That doesn't mean we stop caring for our families. It means we recognize our limits and honor them. One thing that helps is reframing boundaries as an act of love, both for ourselves and for the people we care about. When we set boundaries, we're not just protecting our own mental health. We're also giving others the opportunity to respect us. That's an invitation to healthier, more honest relationships. It's okay to say, I can't talk about this right now, or I'm not able to help with that. It's okay to tell someone, I love you, but I need some space. And yes, it's okay to say, I won't be able to come over every weekend. These aren't acts of selfishness. They're acts of self-respect. Sometimes families push back. They might say, you've changed, that you're not as involved as you used to be. But here's what I want you to remember. People who genuinely love you will eventually respect your boundaries, even if it takes some time. And if they don't, that's valuable information too. It tells you who is invested in your well-being and who is more comfortable when you're sacrificing yourself. Boundaries are not about drawing lines to punish others. They're about creating space where you can thrive. They're about saying, I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect, even by those closest to me. One of the most common things I hear when people start setting boundaries is this sense of guilt creeping in. It's like that little voice in your head saying, who are you to ask for space? Who are you to say no? That's shame talking. It's that old familiar feeling of not being enough. Like you have to earn your place by being endlessly available. But when you set a boundary, you're not just protecting yourself. You're also modeling for others that it's okay to take care of their own needs. You're showing that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself entirely. It means being honest about what you can and cannot give. And when boundaries are respected, it's incredible how relationships can change. I've seen families grow closer, not because they started doing everything together, but because they started being more real with one another. The pressure to always be perfect or always be present fades, and in its place is a sense of authenticity, a way of being together that's rooted in respect, not obligation. I know it's hard. Setting boundaries doesn't come naturally when we've been taught to put others first no matter what. But I also know this: you are worth protecting. Your well-being matters. And the people who truly care about you will learn to honor that. So take a deep breath, practice saying no, even if your voice shakes. Start small if you need to. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but remember, you are allowed to take up space in your own life. And that's not just brave, it's necessary. Let's keep talking about how to build healthy boundaries, because it's one of the most powerful ways we can honor ourselves and our relationships. When we grow up feeling like we have to be perfect to earn love, we end up repeating that pattern. Compassion is the antidote. Practice self-kindness, even when your inner critic tells you that you're not enough. I remember talking to a man who described growing up in a family where perfection wasn't just encouraged, it was demanded. Mistakes weren't lessons, they were failures. If he brought home a B instead of an A, the question wasn't, did you try your best? It was, what went wrong? Over time, he internalized this belief that being less than perfect meant being unworthy. As an adult, even his smallest imperfections felt like glaring flaws. He said, I feel like if I'm not the best, I'm nothing. But that's the cost of perfectionism. It convinces us that our value is directly tied to how flawless we appear. And when that belief starts in our families, it becomes woven into our identity. We grow up thinking, if I can just be good enough, maybe I'll be loved the way I need. But perfectionism is a moving target. Just when you think you've hit it, it shifts and you're left chasing something that was never real in the first place. And here's the tricky part. Perfectionism masquerades as a motivator. It whispers, if you're just a little better, if you just work a little harder, you'll finally be accepted. But that's a lie. Perfectionism isn't about striving for excellence. It's about avoiding shame. It's rooted in fear, the fear that without this polished, untouchable version of yourself, you won't be worthy. Compassion, on the other hand, doesn't ask for perfection. It doesn't require you to have it all together. Compassion says, I see you and I love you, flaws and all. And for many of us, that's a radical idea, especially if we grew up believing love was conditional, based on grades, achievements, or keeping our emotions neatly tucked away. But practicing compassion starts with recognizing the inner critic, the one that sounds a lot like the voices from our past. It's the part of us that says, you should have known better, or why can't you just get it right? That critic thinks it's keeping us safe by pushing us to be better, but really, it's keeping us small. It's keeping us fearful. I once worked with a woman who told me she never gave herself a break. If her project at work wasn't perfect, she'd stay up all night reworking every detail, terrified that someone would see a mistake and judge her. She said, "I know it's not healthy, but I don't know how to stop. I'm scared that if I don't do it perfectly, I'll be seen as a failure." I asked her a simple question. What would you say to a friend who was struggling with the same fear? She paused and then said, "I'd tell her it's okay to make mistakes, that it doesn't define her worth." That's compassion. We can so easily extend it to others, but when it comes to ourselves, we often hesitate. One of the most transformative things we can do is practice talking to ourselves the way we talk to someone we love. It sounds simple, but it's radical. Imagine catching yourself in a moment of self-criticism and saying, "Hey, it's okay, you're doing your best." Or, "It's human to struggle. You're allowed to be imperfect." The more we practice this, the more we break the cycle of perfectionism. It doesn't mean we give up on doing well or striving for growth. It just means we stop making our worth contingent on being flawless. Sometimes showing compassion to ourselves means doing less, not pushing ourselves to exhaustion just to prove we're enough. It means acknowledging when we're tired, letting ourselves rest, and choosing kindness over criticism. It's about giving ourselves permission to be human, even when it feels uncomfortable. And when we model that for ourselves, something incredible happens. We start showing up differently in our relationships. We become less judgmental, more understanding, and a lot more present. Our kids see that it's okay to make mistakes without feeling like they've failed at being good enough. Our friends notice that they can be real with us without feeling like they have to put on a brave face. Compassion breaks the cycle of perfectionism not by eliminating the desire to do well, but by removing the fear of being less than. It's about recognizing that we're worthy, not because we're perfect, but because we're human. So the next time that inner critic pipes up, try saying, "I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed to be messy. I'm still enough." It might feel strange at first, maybe even a little uncomfortable, but keep at it. Self-compassion isn't about lowering your standards. It's about letting go of the impossible one. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that being kind to yourself isn't a weakness. It's a strength. It's saying, "I refuse to treat myself like I'm unworthy just because I didn't get it all right." Because in the end, living wholeheartedly means being brave enough to show up as we are, not as some flawless version we think we should be. Let's keep talking about how compassion, not perfection, can change the way we move through the world. The most powerful way to break the cycle is to start a new one. Be the person who shows love without conditions, who forgives without shaming, and who embraces imperfections as part of being human. You have the power to change the story for yourself and for those who come after you. One of the most profound realizations I've had in my research is that change doesn't just happen when we analyze the past or unpack where our shame came from. Those things are important, yes, but real lasting change happens when we decide to do things differently. When we actively choose to live in a way that aligns with our values, not our fears. It's about saying, "I know what I've been through, I know how it shaped me, and I'm choosing to write a different story." That's hard work. It's uncomfortable, but it's also freeing. I've met people who, after years of carrying generational shame, made the decision to live differently, to break that cycle. They didn't just hope it would change, they chose to be the change. One man shared with me how he grew up feeling like nothing he did was good enough. His father was relentlessly critical, and it didn't matter whether he succeeded or failed, there was always something to criticize. As an adult, this man found himself doing the same thing to his own children, not because he didn't love them, but because criticism was his first language. It was the only way he knew how to express concern or love. One day, after a tough conversation with his teenage son, one where he'd pointed out every mistake instead of acknowledging the effort, the boy just broke down and said, "Dad, I feel like you never see the good in me." And that hit him like a punch to the gut. He realized right then that he was continuing the same cycle that had hurt him. That's the thing about cycles, they keep going unless we consciously interrupt them. And the way we interrupt them is by choosing to show up differently. It doesn't mean we become perfect parents, perfect partners, or perfect people. It means we become intentional. So this man decided to do something radical. The next day he apologized to his son. Not the kind of apology that comes with excuses or justification, just a simple, honest, "I'm sorry. I see how I've been with you and I want to do better." And from that moment, he made a commitment to himself to recognize his son's efforts first, to acknowledge the good, and to offer support before criticism. It wasn't easy. Breaking a pattern that's been ingrained for decades never is. There were moments when he'd catch himself starting to criticize and he'd have to stop mid-sentence, take a breath, and choose a different response. But over time, that choice became more natural. And the relationship with his son, it didn't just improve, it transformed. That's what happens when we choose to break the cycle. We give the people around us, our children, our partners, even ourselves, a new way of being. Instead of letting shame guide our interactions, we let love, patience, and understanding take the lead. I know it's tempting to think, well, this is just how I am. This is how I was raised. But that's not the end of the story. We can honor our experiences, acknowledge how they shaped us, and still decide to do better. It's about embracing the idea that while we didn't choose our past, we absolutely can choose our future. One of the most beautiful parts of this process is seeing how it doesn't just change us, it changes the people around us. When we choose kindness over criticism, acceptance over judgment, we teach others to do the same. We become role models not because we've perfected ourselves, but because we've shown how to be brave enough to change. Sometimes it's easy to think that our family dynamics are set in stone, that what we learned as children will inevitably shape the rest of our lives. But that's not true. It's never too late to make different choices. I've seen people in their 70s and 80s who decided to be kinder to themselves, to stop the harsh self-talk they learned from their own parents. I've seen parents who grew up in environments where love was conditional decide that with their own kids, love would be unconditional. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean erasing the past. It means acknowledging it, learning from it, and consciously choosing not to pass the pain forward. It means showing up with intention, especially when it's hard, and allowing grace to guide us rather than guilt. You have the power to change your family's story. It's not about pretending the hurt never happened. It's about deciding that it won't define what comes next. You don't have to carry the shame that was handed to you. You can put it down and say, "This ends with me." And when you do, you're not just freeing yourself, you're paving the way for a legacy of compassion and courage. You can be the one who says it stops here. You can be the person who models healthy love, who embraces imperfection, and who offers grace instead of judgment. That's not just healing for you, that's healing for everyone around you. So let's keep leaning into the discomfort. Let's keep showing up with courage, and let's keep choosing love over fear. One choice at a time, one day at a time. That's how we break the cycle. Breaking the cycle of shame within our families isn't about perfection. It's about making a choice to show up differently, to speak honestly, and to offer compassion where fear once ruled. It's about daring to set boundaries, to name our shame, and to embrace our own humanity, flaws and all. Remember, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to have it all figured out. Healing is messy and change is uncomfortable, but every small step you take, whether it's having one honest conversation, practicing self-kindness, or simply acknowledging your worth, matters. You are rewriting a story that has been told for generations, and that takes courage. You are not alone in this. We're all figuring it out, one vulnerable moment at a time. The important thing is that you keep choosing to move forward, to let love guide you instead of fear. And as you do, you're not just healing yourself. You're creating a new legacy, one built on understanding, connection, and grace. Good luck. You've got this.